lately I've had a lot of female fans that are texting me. Yeah. They DM me. I don't DM them back. And they make edits about me. And I think about it, and I just don't even see myself in a kind of role like that. And by that, I mean like a domestic scene.
Right.
I know some guys, and I think they're ridiculous, that it really like completes them. The idea that they'd be watching a Disney movie, cuddling under the covers. And I abhor that whole idea, There's nothing about that appeals to me. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's temperament, maybe it's some kind of a spiritual gift, but I just nothing about that ever appealed to me. And maybe that's just the type of person I am.
This is just one episode of a 10-part series with perhaps the most controversial man in America, namely Nicholas J. Fuentes. Now, the whole series will eventually be made public right here, with one new episode dropping each week on Wednesday. And we're not just talking about Nick's childhood experiences or what he did in college back in the day. No, we're focusing our exclusive attention on what Nick believes. What is it that Nick really thinks about race, women, Trump, Israel, Jews, masculinity, and even more? That's what this series is all about. It's a one-stop shop to focus on the core tenets of Nick Fuentes' beliefs on the major headline issues of our day. Now, you're going to have to wait a total of 10 weeks for this to slow drip out to the public. However, for those of you who may be interested, you can binge watch all 10 episodes ad-free today by heading over to patreon.com and searching NXR Studios. And now, back to our show. In 1979, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin gifted Jerry Falwell a luxurious Learjet 25, worth millions of dollars. Officially, it was a token of gratitude for his support. But the truth? It was a transaction. Falwell was now Israel's valuable ally, flying high as a lobbyist in the skies. And from that moment on, Falwell's allegiance soared. His moral majority made backing Israel a core platform, preaching American prosperity hinged upon blessing the Jewish state, or else face God's wrath. Genesis 12:3 was twisted into foreign policy. Now explore the full account in the hyphenated heresy, Judeo-Christianity. Learn how the faith was hijacked and rediscover Christianity on its own historic terms. Pick up your copy today at Amazon.com.
Radical Christian nationalist pastor, Joel Webbin.
Joel Webbin? I'm going to talk about Joel Webbin today.
Joel Webbin has been excellent.
Let's talk about masculinity. The reason I want to bring it up, it's something that we talk about on our show quite often. We talk about biblical patriarchy. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about it is because I've seen some clips. And here's the thing, I get it. Like for you, it's at a much higher degree, but the concept is similar. Like I've been clipped out a million times and I'm like, wait, that's not the full context. And then also, your show is unique because it's like an hour of like, here's the news, this is what's going on, it's serious. And then an hour of like just being a goofball with the super chats, you know what I mean? And so people like, they'll pick out like a super chat and say, he said this and he believes it with everything in his heart. And it's like, I think he was joking, you know? So masculinity, the one clip that I'm thinking of, and we can start there, but I'd like to just get your views wholesale. But you were talking about, peak masculinity is virtually, you didn't say it exactly like this, but asexual. If you're like peak man, you live on a mountain in the Himalayas, something like that, in the woods, you're swinging an axe and you're so one with God and nature and so otherworldly that you forget that you even have, a penis between your legs, you're just like, and so for me, like I I think that part of this, and so I'm curious what you think, but I think part of it actually might be a Catholic Protestant divide.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to offend the Catholics, but that actually, and so I'm not saying this in a mean-spirited way, but I actually think that view is kind of consistent with Catholicism. Because when I think, like, if I was a Catholic and I want to be the most valuable, God-honoring, like benevolent to the world person I'd probably pursue the priesthood, which is a sexual position.
Right.
It's Protestants where it's like, you've got pastors like me who have so many kids, you have to buy the bus, the mini bus, to drive. So that's kind of like a distinctly Protestant thing. Now, Catholics, obviously, like Catholics have big families, but when you think of like, because the way you worded it was not average masculinity. The average Catholic probably should have lots of kids and has historically, but you were saying like peak masculine, like one with God, one with the universe, one with nature, and just not thinking about sex. And so I thought immediately Catholic priest, is that part of what was in your mind?
Yes, 100%. And I have had this debate with Protestants, with Mormons actually, because, and I'm not familiar with all the Protestant theology, but I believe Protestants think that you should have a family. It's actually like a good thing. Yeah. Whereas Catholics see it more of as a concession from God, that marriage is
a distraction.
Not a distraction, but that the institution of marriage was given to us as a concession because St. Paul says it's better for man to be alone.
Right.
But we can have a wife, and it's viewed more as like an accommodation for mankind than it is a positive good in and of itself. And so it does come from a very Catholic place because Catholics have a strong tradition of monasteries, monastic life, right. Ascetic life, and really the complete repudiation of the world, of the flesh, and pursuing a life of modesty, poverty, chastity. And we see that as actually the most, the highest spiritual life, like you said, like it is for a priest, where a priest doesn't take a wife because right. he's focused on God. His only commitment is to God. So, and it was from that place, and that is that's my unironic opinion. That was not a joke at all.
No, I could tell that one. I was like, he's saying it in a humorous way, but I was like, no, I think there actually are religious implications under this. There's a reason.
Right. And, so yeah, I do believe, and I identify that with masculinity. I think that the priesthood, I think that the monastic life is the most masculine, manly thing that a guy can do. And that's not my prescription for every man.
Right.
Because I tell my followers all the time, I said, the vast majority of people, they should get married. That right. is what is best for them.
Better to marry than to burn with passion.
Right.
Like it's like, well, I'm going to stay single so that I can do all these things in my work life and career, but I'm just going to be, sleeping around all the time. Well, then, no, you should get married.
Right.
But if a guy like actually is capable, I believe it's a supernatural gift. So like what you're referencing was St. Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, where he talks about celibacy. A lot of guys will say singleness is a gift. I think singleness is actually a curse, but I think celibacy is a gift. And so if you have the gift of celibacy, then all the negative effects, the loneliness, the difficult not having a helpmate, right? Eve is given to Adam as a helpmate. So like a life of loneliness in terms of companionship, a life of having to do a lot of things yourself instead of having a helpmate. I think that those are net negatives. So I think that's the suffering piece. But the supernatural ability not to be overcome by fleshly appetites, to where you could be single and have those challenges, but not sin. That's celibacy. So celibacy is a gift. Singleness is just a state of life, is right. the way that I would view. And then Paul also says, like, the man who's married, his interests are divided, how he can please the Lord, but also how he can please his wife. Whereas the one who is single can be in full devotion to the Lord. And that's why that's the argument that he gives for why it's better. He says, I think it's better to remain as I am, speaking of himself, being single. But he says to each one is given a gift. And so marriage is a gift. And celibacy is a gift. So he's saying, if you have the gift of celibacy, remain single so that you won't be divided in your interest. And if you don't have the gift of celibacy, then then it's should be assumed that providentially God has the gift of marriage awaiting. So, what do you think?
I agree. And I think that you're right. For the vast majority of people, that's not really on the table. Celibacy is not, because most people have those, like you said, these very strong passions, and like you said, they burn with lust. So for most people, that is their vocation, is to be a husband and a father. But I do think that it is the higher state to be celibate if you're called for that, if, like you said, you have that gift, whether it's a monastic life or you're just celibate in general. And I push that.
Yeah, I don't think it has to mean clergy.
Right.
I think you can be celibate for, like, historically, there are some guys where it's like, this guy was not clergy, but he was an inventor, innovator, or a general in an army during a wartime. And it's like, yeah, there's no way he could have been a husband.
Right.
At least not well.
Yeah. And I think that I like that Catholic point of view on it, because I do tend to find that family can be another way that people are attached to the world. I think that, for a lot of people that say family is everything, in many cases, they sometimes put their family over God, or over their commitments to God, or over what is right. And so I think that it's important that we point towards aspirationally that is kind of the pinnacle of masculinity, is to be completely devoted to God, rather than thinking that the pinnacle of masculinity is to be a ladies' man, which some might say, or the family man even necessarily, or to do everything for your wife and kids, but it's to do everything for God. So it is consistent, like you said, I think, with the Catholic faith.
Yeah, so I view the family, the wife, the children, as kind of like the venue, the context where, for a married man with a family, his masculinity is displayed, where it's demonstrated. But I think that being a husband and fatherhood can't be the source of masculinity. And I've noticed that even among Protestants, that if somebody just asks the general question, what is biblical masculinity? And nowhere in your definition is there anything outside of being a husband and being a father, then you've essentially said that until marriage and family happen, you don't actually have men and women. You have like this kind of androgynous blank slate, that human beings are basically blank slates, and they become masculine and become feminine upon marriage and family, but they're not prior. And I do think that that being a husband and being a father is one of the chief venues, not a source of masculinity, but one of the chief venues in which masculinity shines. But I think that the way that we define masculinity has to be more than just, he's a great husband, he's a great father. Like, there has to be something more fundamental, more innate. It's like I have, 4 daughters and 1 son. My son, he's barely 3 years old. And, but it's like very clear he's a boy. He has no wife. He has no children. It's like, yeah, this guy, like, it's in his bones. I mean, we can dig up bones of like people who've been dead for centuries. And just from the bone, we can tell that was a man. That was a woman. Like, it runs deep. It's innate to who we are.
Right. Yeah. And I totally agree. And I think that, there is sort of a problem among Protestants and Catholics, among Christians, I think in general, that a lot of these guys, they do define their masculinity sort of contingent on the women in their lives, their girlfriends, their spouse. And, I would say that there's like a lot of simping going on.
Yeah.
And I think that in a sense, they're kind of losing I would say that there's something masculine about not being contingent and not being contingent on another person or on a family like that. And I agree that you have to find a source of masculinity that doesn't just come from your relation to your wife or kids.
Right. It seems ironic. So basically, what makes a man a woman?
Right. Right.
A woman is what makes you become a man. That's just where we are right now, I think, culturally, and all that has seeped into the church is, men, they're called to protect and provide, and they are the head of the home. Well, in what context can they lead? Wherever their wife gives them permission.
Right, right.
It's a gynocracy. I mean, like we have two forms of leaders. We have female leaders and female adjacent, women of both sexes. That's just kind of where we are as a country, which is really sad and pathetic.
Right.
It's embarrassing.
It is. And I think that's why, especially lately, and it's sort of to my chagrin, I think it's sort of a missed opportunity. Now the biggest proponents of masculinity are people that are secular or Muslim.
Right.
That's why it's become extremely attractive to young men to be pagan in some cases, to be Muslim and take multiple wives, or to be completely secular because, and the elephant in the room is a guy like Andrew Tate, who he has become the face and the avatar of masculinity in a culture that is completely gynocratic and feminist. And he's somebody who I don't believe in terms of virtue is necessarily a role model.
Right.
He's not Christian or Catholic.
Right.
He's not in favor of monogamy. He's not in favor of, you could say, moral restraint or discipline because he has this life where he's running these camera websites and things like that.
Yeah.
He has a harem. But unlike almost any Catholic, unlike almost any, I would say even regular Protestant Christian, non-denominational Christian, he's actually forcefully reasserting male autonomy and male leadership, I would say even better, and masculinity against feminism, where you're not getting that from Christians at all.
I tell people all the time, like, if you don't like Andrew Tate, I get it, but you have Christian men to blame.
Yeah.
I mean, Andrew Tate... nature abhors a vacuum. Andrew Tate filled the vacuum. He looked and saw, all the Christian men are effeminate. And so he just stepped in and just with a little bit of it's like, how did you do this? A little bit of ambition. I chose not to be 300 pounds. Worked some exercise, some ambition, some business dealings. And it was pretty much that easy to get a following on the backdrop of a nation and a church within the nation that has such a vacuum for men, for masculinity, which is sad. Let's, if you don't mind, and you just talk about what you're comfortable with, but let's talk about you specifically. So, you said you're chopping down wood on top of a mountain, you're not thinking about women, you're not thinking about marriage, you're not thinking about sex or any of those things. You're just kind of one with God, one with nature, doing your thing. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think some of it, like I already said, we've discussed, I think some of that stems from your faith, that you're Catholic, whereas I'm Protestant. So I'm going to root masculinity not in marriage and family, but I am going to give probably more value to marriage and family, especially in the case of the clergy, than you would. You would see it as a compromise. So I think part of it is the difference between us is the Catholic-Protestant divide, but also part of the difference is the personal divide. You're 27 and single. I'm married and have 5 kids. And so, thinking about you personally, individually, you strike me as an obsessive person and all the best ways. Yeah, and I'm sure, some of the bad ways, but like you're building an empire. You're trying to take over the world, or at least take over the country, and make a difference. Your life does not seem like a day-to-day basis conducive whatsoever to marriage and family. And there have been men like that throughout history that, there's been pockets of history and not just pockets, like actually long periods where the average eligible bachelor was 35 years old. Like he spent the first couple decades of adulthood achieving, pursuing, building, and then beckoned a wife into a life that he had already established so that she didn't have to go through all the hell, to get there. Like I think of the last 10 years of your life, and it probably would have been miserable. I mean, it already was, but you're a guy, and it was probably hard. Like women, NPCs, non-player, character, but also like naturally pursuing consensus. Women just, that's the default setting. It's the factory setting. I think for every woman is like, people say like, even if we win, you know, how will the women come along? Because they're all, you know, liberal and progressive. And I'm like, no, they're not. Like, not ideologically so.
Right.
Like the irony is it's like we have all these rebellious women against authority. No, they're actually doing what women have always done throughout all of history. They're submitting to authority. The problem is the authority. The reigning authority is a libtard, progressive, anti-America, anti-God authority. And the moment that shifts, right? So I don't have to go around changing hearts and minds with each individual woman. Like, I'm called to do that with my wife and, you know, with my daughters. And but when I think of women in America as a whole, all I have to do is dethrone the current king, right? Because that's what they're doing. Is like they're being individuals and sticking it to the man. No, they're not. They're submitting to the man. The man just sucks. So I just have to beat him.
Right.
And all of a sudden the chip on the back of their head will be replaced with a new chip, and everybody will be making sourdough and wearing sundresses and, you know, and we'll be fine. That's my view. I think that's the way that women are. They naturally pursue consensus. But because of that, you take a woman, just imagine the last 10 years, and she's your wife with that default setting of naturally pursuing consensus. And you're arguably the most hated man in America. Like, I mean, you could have been divorced like 7 times by now. Yeah. You know what I mean? It could have been really, really rough. So do you think you'll get married eventually? Because it does seem like, I mean, plenty of people hate you. You're still, I mean, you got welcomed onto Spotify and then immediately banned right back up. Like, but it does seem like the tide is turning. I could see, maybe not tomorrow, but I think in the near future, where it's like you actually are kind of established. Still people hate you, but it's like you kind of made it. You kind of made it. Right. And at that point, like, I feel like marriage could be in the cards in a way that it wasn't prior.
Well, that's certainly true, because for the past 10 years, it just would not have worked for all the reasons you said. And it was just a broader culture. It was hard to have friends. And I said this to Candace Owens. I said, forget even about marriage or a dating life, which requires a lot of trust, because you're intimate with a romantic partner like that in a way that you aren't even with your closest friends, which makes you more vulnerable. And if things go wrong, if they don't agree with your decisions, or, you know, they look for the exit for whatever reason, and this has been true in right-wing politics for a long time. In fact, I know a lot of people, they get accused of rape. They get accused of sexual assault. Yeah. Like you said, many times it's divorce and it's life-ruining. But not only that, sometimes they'll go and spill secrets or information to the press. Like this has all been very commonplace, and that has just been kind of the social environment. That's a social landscape, and women are the ultimate enforcers of conformity.
Yep. So it's the legal environment.
Yes.
I mean, all the courts are geared towards the women.
All of it. Yeah.
You'll lose your kids.
Thing.
You'll lose your house. Right.
So for the past 10 years, it's not even been in the cards to have really any social life at all. It's a big reason why I don't drink either. If I go out and I'm partying and drinking, that's a vulnerability also. So it's been kind of like a fortress siege mentality for as long as I've been doing this. And, you know, I would say, even going back to the conversation quickly about marriage, a big part, in my opinion, of being a man is being entrepreneurial, risk-taking. And, you know, what a lot of people don't maybe factor in about marriage is that once you get married, your ability to take risks goes down dramatically. Because when you're living, or rather, I should say, when your wife and kids are dependent on you, you can't afford to die. Right. And that means you can't risk anything where you might die or be imprisoned. And you also can't do anything that rocks the boat too much, because you need a steady income. You need, and you know, you can take risks within reason, and some risks are unavoidable, but you know, I joke on my show, it's like every TV show that you love is about a guy who's trying to build an empire, but like the wife is nagging him because it's too chaotic or disruptive or risky. So there's those reasons too. I feel obligated to get married, but I'm going to be honest, I don't really want to. It hasn't been the biggest sacrifice for me, right, to not be married, you know, and I could lean on that and say, you know, it's for religious reasons or something. But I try to be as honest as possible on my show and say it's really just not my interest. Some people, and we all know some guys that they're completely obsessed with chasing women. And that's all that will make them happy is to get married and have kids. And some men less so. Me, I would say that was never something that was very meaningful to me. Anything social, anything emotional, anything intimate. For me, and you know, you're right, I'm a very obsessive person. I don't think I'm autistic, but I do.
Friend.
Yeah.
You've got to be a little autistic.
Maybe a little on spectrum. But I would say that, you know, whatever the diagnosis, I'm extremely preoccupied with what I do.
Right.
It hasn't been a great sacrifice because I love what I do.
Right.
So I think it's become possible, and I certainly feel obligated to, and I like the idea of it, having kids and having a family, but it's going to be a chore for me. It's really going to be, I'm going to have to work at it. It's something that doesn't come easily to me. Let's put it that way.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that's what I figured. That seems obvious. Now, one of the encouraging things about just the way that God built the world and the way that life seems to work is that work and the fruits of labor compound. And so they compound with time and therefore with age. And so, you know, you can work like 12-hour days in your 20s and get this much return. And then you can do, you know, you become wiser, you become more effective, you become more experienced, more efficient. You also have more resources later on to where you can delegate and outsource and all these different things. You know, and so I do think that there's something like one of the hardest stages of life is finding who you are and establishing, you know, what it is, your vocation and what it is that you're called to do, not just work, not just job, but vocation, calling. And that's really, really tough. Later on though, it's entirely conceivable that you could have an exponentially larger impact with half the effort. Not now, that doesn't mean that personally that you would be willing to do that. You strike me as the kind of guy, you're like, okay, if I can get 10 times the impact with half the effort, well, I could also get 20 times the impact, you know, by doing the same amount of effort. And you love what you do. And so I think, you know, your wife will probably, and you before the Lord and before her, if you do get married, will constantly have to battle the temptation to idolize your work above your family. Like you strike, I mean, most guys deal with that to some extent. And pretty much the only guys who don't are, if they were honest, are guys who it's because their work isn't meaningful. They hate what they do.
Right.
But anybody who has a sense of not just a job, but vocation is constantly going to have to recenter himself in terms of putting his family above his job, you know, and then of course, putting the Lord above it all. Okay. So that's like in terms of work and vocation that, you know, these last 10 years and maybe for the foreseeable future, you know, practically speaking, in terms of time, in terms of all the heat and the controversy and these kinds of things, a wife marriage would not have been conducive. Beyond that though, and this is, you know, you can decline to answer, of course, but beyond just the work and your, you know, your life, your personality and what you're doing, you do seem like when again, going back to this illustration of swinging the axe, part of me felt like, is he talking about himself? Like, are you, like, obviously you are obsessed and just, you know, and just passionate about what you do. But is it more than that? Is it more than just, I love what I do and I can do it 14 hours a day? Or is there also like, yeah, I don't really think about marriage much and I don't actually think about women much.
Well, I love solace. I love being alone. And I just don't, I'm not a very social or emotional or sexual even person.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So we've talked about celibacy. I know this is weird, but I like, as soon as I saw that clip and, you know, and everybody's like, well, Nick is gay, you know, or whatever, like, you know, because you smiled at someone once or whatever it is. But I thought, I wonder if Nick might be celibate. I wonder if God gave him like that supernatural gift. Have you ever thought about that?
Not particularly. I just think it's really more of a temperament thing. I think it's more, you know, because I I just don't, if you watch my show, I find it very difficult to get along with anybody in any context.
I'm aware.
Yeah. And it's been a real struggle my entire life because I don't really see people very much in my life. I'm very alone. And, but I like that. I like the silence. I like having complete control over my environment. So it, like you said, I mean, marriage, and it would be an easy answer to say, well, I'm just celibate because I'm so religious. But I really just don't see myself as someone that could share my interior life, my interior space. When I think about even being married, to me, there's very little that's appealing to me about it. And like I said, for some men, they can't live without some of these things.
Right.
A social life, a romantic life.
And sex being a big one. I mean,
Sex
even
also.
biblically, like not trying to be crude, but the Apostle Paul, like when you think of like, well, what are the purposes for marriage? Like what are God's, built-in purposes? Like procreation, of course. And that's good. Like be fruitful and multiply. That's the cultural mandate that we see, dominion in the very beginning. So procreation, that's one of them. Companionship, right? It's not good for man to be alone. God sees Adam before he made Eve. So companionship and a helpmate. So that's mission, like that she can actually serve the man's, and the man is not her helpmate. This is not a mutual thing. Women all the time will be like, yeah, but you need to be her helpmate too. No, she is my assistant,
Right.
a cherished assistant, a loved assistant, but no, we are not mutual assistants. I have a calling from God. I'm pursuing that. It's like, well, she has a calling from God too. Yes, her calling is to help me in my calling. That's her calling.
Right.
And one of the biggest ways she helps is keeping 5 little people alive when I'm gone, working, raising our children. But yeah, so companionship, an aid in the mission, procreation to fill the earth with image-bearing creatures that hopefully by God's grace would be converted and worshipers of the triune God. But what I'm getting at is one of the major New Testament cited purposes for marriage is to, as a hedge against temptation so that you don't screw up your life sexually. Like that, and women especially don't like that because it doesn't sound romantic at all. It's like, hey baby, it's in my vows, on your wedding day. It's like, you're saying like why you're marrying the person. It's like, I'm marrying you because I love you so much. And I think you'll be really good to help me not sleep with 100 other people. It's like, really? and that doesn't sound great, but it's literally in the Bible. Like if a man burns with passion, let him marry. Why? So that desire would have a ethical, holy venue to be fulfilled so that he would avoid falling into sexual sin. So in other words, and maybe there's a gradation, a sliding scale here, like not just, a switch like celibate and just thinking about sex 24/7. I'm sure there's some in between, but listening to some of your stuff and spending a little bit of time with you this week in person, I just thought like, okay, maybe he has the gift of celibacy. And if not, he definitely on that scale of like the dude who's a total horn dog that's thinking about chicks all the time is just pretty much a slave to sex. You definitely don't seem like that.
Yeah. And I never really have been.
Yeah.
And, it's not that I don't have sexual thoughts. I do. It's just that that is not what drives me. That's not what drives my life. It's not what occupies my thoughts most of the time. And the trade-off that's involved in, and even pursuing sex for that matter, I talk about it on my show, the whole prospect of, courtship and everything like that. It just seems very tedious to me and basically just not worth, I so dislike that aspect of it. It's just not even worth it to me. And then beyond that, I mean, marriage in general, some people, and I talk about this on my show too, a lot of men, they love the idea of physical contact, cuddling, affection, basically, and intimacy. And me, I'm the complete opposite. Like I really do not find that appealing at all. And the idea of it, lately I've had a lot of female fans that are texting me. They DM me. I don't DM them back. And they make edits about me. And I think about it, and I just don't even see myself in a kind of role like that. And by that, I mean like a domestic scene.
Right.
You know, I know some guys, and I think they're ridiculous, that it really like completes them. The idea that they'd be watching a Disney movie, cuddling under the covers. And I abhor that whole idea, you know?
Yeah.
There's nothing about that appeals to me. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's temperament, maybe it's some kind of a spiritual gift, but I just nothing about that ever appealed to me. And maybe that's just the type of person I am. But needless to say, that's just never something that's driven my life forward. But I think that as I get older, I'll say this: I don't want to be like a 40-year-old single man. I think that's extremely cringe. And I said on my show recently, it's like there's sort of two bad options. I don't really love seeing myself as a husband and saying like my wife. There's something else about getting older. It's sort of like once you get married, it's like, okay, we're kind of in the end game here. But at the same time, it's maybe worse not to be married.
Yeah.
And so
I think
it's
worse if you are in the end game and not married.
Right.
Like,
Well
I mean,
said.
if you're young and single, that's one thing. But when you're old and single,
not cool.
great. Yeah,
Right. Not
great.
fun.
Yeah. And like marriage is, I mean, there's so many things in life that have, inherent value, but are also socially signs of status. Like when someone is, pushing up in years and single, I think society just instinctively thinks, what's wrong with them?
Right.
Like, are they just a total jerk, or are they, that they're undisciplined, or, like it actually says something. Like even the people who hate me, like absolutely hate me, they wish that I was single because it'd be easier to hate me. They're like, because it's really hard to say like this guy's a monster when he has, his white, blonde, smiling, adoring wife and his 5 children, running up to him, 4 of them being daughters, saying, "Daddy," it's like, I mean, it's just hard to paint that picture.
Right.
That, like someone is just utterly evil when there's 6 people in his life that adore him, so it is kind of, it's almost like a resume, like the wife and kids. And so it's just like when you're 15 and you don't have Harvard on your resume, nobody, assumes that means that you're stupid. It's like, well, he's only 15. He wouldn't be able to go to Harvard even if he was gifted and intelligent and capable. But eventually the verdict comes back in. Like I remember when I hit 30, like, cause when you're 22, you're like, I could be anything. But by the time I was 30, like the kind of guys that I admired, that I wanted to be like, I was able to look and say, where were they at 30? Oh, they were speaking 3 languages. They were studying, in England, whatever. Yeah, I think it's safe to say, I look at, this is my pedigree, this is theirs. That ship sailed, like that's, God will use me however he wants to use me, but it won't be like that. I'm not that guy. If I was that guy, to think that I would be where they are at 50, I would need to be somewhere where they were at 30. You see what I'm saying? And I think the same kind of, so whether it's pedigree of education, or earning potential and, career. And I think that marriage and family is kind of like just one of those benchmarks of a sign of credibility. So there's a certain point where it's like singleness can be advantageous. And then there's a certain point where I think it becomes a liability.
I don't know. I would say that that's certainly true from a reputation point of view, but at the same time, there are so many risks these days of being married.
Yeah.
Huge liability, I think a lot of people will acknowledge, at least on our side, that you don't want to be single and all that sort of thing, but few people acknowledge the real risks of being married. And maybe that's because there's not a good answer for that from a traditional Christian point of view.
Right.
Which is that the social and legal climate, it isn't what it is 100 years ago. And so a lot of people want to kind of role play like it's the 1900s or the 1800s for that matter. And that works, I think, up to a point, as long as both parties are on the same page. But as you know, and I know because I have parents that are still married, that have been married for 35 years, when you're married, you're in it for the long haul.
Right.
And people change. over decades, over a long period of time. And in a environment where divorce is not only incentivized legally, but encouraged socially, you just really never know what is going to happen in the long run. And especially for someone like myself, I don't think the risks ever really go away for something like that.
Yeah.
And that is actually a big concern for me. It's not just that I'm preoccupied and I have to be very mobile and agile and able to take on risk. And, you know, on some level, I have to be willing to die every day. If you look at what happened to Charlie Kirk, I mean, and what almost happened to me, someone showed up to my house with a gun. I mean, imagine if I had a wife and kids. On some level, it wouldn't be responsible for me to keep doing what I do. But even beside that, it's that's always could be the weakest link, which is to say, if the forces that I fight against, if they can't get to me, if they can't tempt me, if they can't trap me, if they can't get me vulnerable, they'll always go for the person closest to you.
Right.
And if that person is a woman,
Right.
well, you might be in trouble because women are more vulnerable to that sort of thing than men. And they have a way of rationalizing. I don't want to say treachery or something, but women, I think, are a lot more malleable. They panic. And so if you're in that siege mentality of everyone, which I think is very clear in my case, trying to kill me or knock me off or gossip about me, and then you bring someone into the fold, a woman who is a lot more, you know, I'd never panic, but women, that's sort of what they do. There is something extremely risky about that. And I do think about that a lot, even in the early stages of a relationship. Forget about marriage when they're entitled to half your things and they share a home with you and they have your children, which is a big form of leverage. Even in those initial stages, at what point do you take off your mask? At what point do you fully trust somebody? Even telling them where you live, for example,
Right.
You know, even telling them your address, let's say, in my case, that's just kind of the life that I signed up for. So, you know, I want to get married, I think, at some point, but I definitely don't feel any pressure to, because a lot of people want that for me, or they wish that I would, but they also don't live my life.
Right.
And they don't really understand my life.
Right.
Or me, for that matter. So that's kind of where I come at it from.
Yeah, there's a certain assurance, and you know, I think of the Proverbs that say, you know, rejoice in the wife of your youth always, like not growing apart, continuing to love her. But just that last part, the wife of your youth, there's a certain assurance in meeting. It's, you know, someone being a childhood friend, like before you became what you were, you know, what you are. Like there would be a certain security in knowing, like, let's say that, you know, instead of blowing up into the stratosphere at 17, let's say it happened at 27, right? Your age now, but you met, you know, your sweetheart at 17 and you know, got married at 20. And so you already have like 7 years, the better part of a decade under your belt. And you know, she loved you for you before anybody knew your name, before any of these things happened. And then when those things do happen, like there's like, you never have to wonder, you never have to question. And now, like, whoever you meet, you will wonder, you know, like you're like, how big is her nose? You know, when you take her out on the first day, like, wait a second, I said it, not you, you know, but I mean, but seriously, like it's, people say that's silly. No, it's not. It's not silly. Like to think that, you know, because even if it's random, you just meet her at a coffee shop. Like the CIA or Mossad or whatever, like to think that they would plant a woman in your path a couple of times. Like we've seen it in the movies, you know, like, so, all right. So that we're following Nick, we've traced him. We know his daily routine when he goes out in public. And so we're going to have this woman, you know, she's going to be regularly stationed in these places and then, you know, have some kind of seemingly natural, you know, bumping into Nick and having a conversation. And I mean, all that could be orchestrated. Absolutely. It's like not inconceivable at all. So all that being said, if you do get married, how do you think, obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but how would it happen?
I have no idea. And I have no plan for it either.
Right.
because, you think about how people, I think that normies, let's say, they have a hard time finding a wife.
Right.
If you talk to normie men who may not even share our politics, period, let alone be in politics, how do they find a wife? It's the dating apps.
Right.
Maybe going to a bar. I can't see myself doing either of those things.
If you were on a dating app, you would be mocked relentlessly forever.
Yes.
Like seriously, I mean, it'd be screenshots posted everywhere, like you can't.
Exactly. And going to a bar, how's the introduction going to go? Hey, I'm like the most notorious extremist in America. So it'd have to be arranged in some way, or like you said, a family friend or something, although I don't know any like that. It would have to be something of that nature. But I always thought in the back of my mind that if it was meant to be, God will provide that in my life, and it will be unmistakable. And if not, then maybe it's not meant to be. But I'm definitely going to get more serious about pursuing that as I get older. With each passing year, I think, all right, it's maybe it's time now to start looking. And it definitely, I will say, gets easier. I seem to have come out on the other side of so much turbulence.
You're still hated, but I would say, I think it's safe to say you made it. If they were going to take you out, I think in terms of the statistical likelihood, it was the last 10 years. Like if they were going to be able to crush you, because they threw everything at you.
That's true. I would also say, though, certainly it's less turbulent now, because for years the money was all over the place and getting attacked constantly. It just was uncertain if I would ever achieve that like liftoff velocity, the breakout velocity. But the higher up the mountain you go, the more treacherous it becomes.
Yeah.
The more influence, the more power, the more you paint a target on your back. And certainly I've got the attention of powerful people now. And I would say it's almost the opposite. Maybe it's more likely.
Okay.
But it's a different kind of threat.
Well, more likely in terms of like an assassination, like a Charlie Kirk situation, yes. I think moving forward, more likely. But in terms of the likelihood of you just being, silenced and suppressed and dying by, 1,000 paper cuts kind of situation, I feel like that you've broken out and the genie's not going to go back in the bottle. Like even if Spotify never lets you on or YouTube never lets you on, like it's at this point pretty inevitable.
I don't know. I think it's still pretty fragile.
Okay.
And maybe that's PTSD on my part.
Yeah, maybe.
Because when you have been, had the rug pulled out from under you so many times, you're always just waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm optimistic and I'm very pleasantly surprised by what has happened. I never thought things would go in the opposite direction. And by that, I mean censorship and cancel culture, political correctness. It was our understanding that it would always get worse forever.
Right.
More censorship, it would just get more extreme. Nothing surprises you. So I definitely feel very good about where we are, but having seen how things can turn on a dime and the pendulum swing back and forth, it does make me nervous. I'm always a little uneasy. So that's why I'll always have my guard up a little bit.
Last question. So it'd be hard to meet, a woman in person. You never know, does she know me? Is she an op? Something like that. What about mass? Are you able to physically attend mass?
Yes. I don't want to say how.
Oh, that's fine.
But I attend mass in a way where I have more confidence that I won't be identified. And the trouble with something like that is, I don't even want to say, but if someone is trying to, let's say, hurt you, they observe your patterns. When you leave the house, when you return, in other words, you're looking for predictable behaviors. You're looking for patterns. So I try not to be predictable. I try to break up the pattern a little bit. So I'm not going to get too detailed, but maybe you can imagine.
Yeah.
But I mean, are you asking about meeting a woman at mass or something?
No,
like that?
I was just thinking,
or just in general?
I was just thinking I know you're Catholic, but the thought crossed my mind. I wonder if he ever gets to physically attend mass.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I'll say this. I definitely have to avoid the traditional masses, because that's where all the groypers are going to be.
Right.
And, or my biggest detractors. And there have been stories floated online. People make things up. Some woman said I got yelled at traditional mass by women, and it's like that never happened. But that if you go to these things, it then becomes a forum for everybody to give me their feedback.
Right.
Which I'm not really interested in. I don't go there for that purpose.
Right.
But yeah, like everything else, it's a logistical challenge.
Yeah. I imagine aside from that and traveling, if I was you, I probably just won't leave my house. Do you stay home most of the time?
I do. I almost never leave.
That's what I figured. I mean, these days you can order everything, have everything delivered. So I kind of imagine you a hermit of sorts.
Which I like.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Which leads us full circle all the way back to the beginning. The guy, all alone swinging the axe. I felt like when you said that, I mean, you were being goofy in the way that you were saying it. You had a smile on your face, but I thought, no, he really means that. And I think for two reasons. I think what he just depicted is Catholic. And also it's him. That's kind of, I think he's describing something that actually does stem out of Catholicism in a way that it's foreign to Protestants. But then also something that I think is unique to him as an individual. So thanks for the show. Appreciate it. And we'll see everybody in the next episode.
For those of you who may not be aware, I have the immense privilege of also serving as president for a sister organization to NXR Studios, which is a nonprofit 501c3 Christian organization called Right Response Ministries. Our focus with this organization is to train and equip pastors and congregants in the Protestant church, primarily the evangelical church, right here in America. What are we trying to train them in? Well, let's just say we're trying to help evangelical Protestant churches in America to stop being so insufferable, to stop being Zionist shills, to be engaged, not apathetic, but activated in the realm of politics and culture. The things that you've been hearing in this series that myself and Nick Fuentes are talking about, we want to see Protestant churches right here in America apply these things to get in the game, to win our country back. We want to see evangelicals and Protestants in America actually be America first, not serving a foreign country at the expense of our own interest, but serving Christ and serving Americans. If you'd like to support us in this mission, we could greatly use your help. You can give a tax-deductible donation by simply going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. Again, that's rightresponseministries.com/donate. God bless.